The battle over truth begins, as the White House press secretary locks eyes with Hollywood's greatest icon Fire and Stardust. If you want every twist, every reveal, hit subscribe now. The stakes have never been higher. The studio hummed with quiet anticipation, as if the air itself had paused to listen. Shadows stretched long over the grand piano at the center of the stage, its polished surface reflecting the cold glow of the overhead lights. The cameras loomed like predators, their lenses glinting with mechanical precision, capturing every flicker of emotion, every shift in posture. In the background, the murmurs of technicians and analysts faded into the hush of the audience, who leaned in, breath held, as if the outcome of this encounter might shape the world they lived in. A scent of tension lingered, sharp and electric, like the scent of ozone before lightning strikes. She stood like a general on the field, her hand resting on the podium, fingers curling as if grasping for control. The weight of authority pressed against her shoulders, a cloak woven from public scrutiny and political pressure. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the audience, calculating every potential reaction. Beside her, the man who had become legend in another arena watched with silent amusement, like a cat observing a mouse before pouncing. His posture was effortless, his expression unreadable, but the room felt the pull of his presence, a gravitational force that bent the atmosphere around him. Today was not just a conversation, it was a collision of truth and myth, of policy and performance, and the world was watching. The stakes were not in the script but in the silence between words. A single misstep could unravel everything, and the pressure was a noose around their throats, tightening with each heartbeat. The cameras had begun to whir, a sound like the ticking of a clock counting down to an inevitable reckoning. The air was thick with expectation, each second stretching like taffy pulled from a flame. This was more than a debate, it was a reckoning. Personet's voice was steady, but her fingers twitched. The thrill of coming out on top coiled through her veins like a live wire, ready to spark at the smallest provocation. She could feel the weight of her position, every word she spoke was a battle cry in the war of public perception. The room was hers, the stage hers, and the audience hers to sway. She was not just defending a narrative, she was defending the very foundation of her power. Person B, in contrast, seemed to move through the moment like a tide, unhurried and unshaken. His gaze was cool, evaluating, as if he had already seen the outcome of every possible path. He was not here to be swayed but to observe, to dissect, to dismantle the illusion that had been called truth. His silence was not a void, it was a strategy, a calculated pause before the first blow. The room felt the weight of their opposing forces, a clash of ideals that sent vibrations through the floor. The cameras, ever watchful, seemed to breathe in sync with the tension. And somewhere in the crowd, someone's heart pounded, caught in the gravitational pull of the unknown. Personet stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. In 4 days the truth will set you free, but only if you're ready to accept it. Her words hung in the air, a challenge draped in conviction. The fire in her eyes was not just rhetoric, it was the fuel that had carried her through the corridors of power. Person B tilted his head slightly, the motion subtle but deliberate. A fine line between truth and performance, he mused, his voice smooth and measured like a river carving its path through stone. And I've spent a lifetime mastering that line. He did not speak to provoke but to remind, this was not a debate but a duel of narratives, and he was the maestro who had conducted them all. The room seemed to hold its breath. The stage, lit like a crucible, had become the arena where truth would either triumph or be reshaped. The cameras captured every detail, every glance, every flicker of emotion. The air in the studio crackled with energy, a charged field where every word was a spark. Personet's mind raced, her years of political maneuvering crystallizing into a singular focus, the performance that would dominate the narrative. She had faced down critics, journalists, and congressmen, but this was different. This was an audience that did not just read headlines, they lived them. Person B, ever the storyteller, allowed the silence to linger, letting the gravity of the moment settle. The cameras zoomed in on his face, catching the faintest hint of a smile, the kind that suggests he already knows the outcome. He had played bigger roles than this, stood against greater forces, and had always emerged with the script in hand. The stakes were not just about who would win the argument but about who would shape the story. The cameras, the audience, the unseen analysts, they were all waiting for the first punch, the first line that would ignite the firestorm. Then Personet stepped into the spotlight, her voice rising like a storm on the horizon. Imagine being in the Oval Office, she began, the words painting a scene so vivid it felt like a movie reel unfolding in real time. Imagine the weight of the world on your shoulders, the pulse of every decision echoing through the halls of history. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the raw energy of someone who had lived every moment of that pressure. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, letting the memory settle. The kind of pressure that makes you question every answer you give. Every statement is a thread in the web of lies, and you have to choose carefully which one to pull. Her words were not just rhetoric, they were a confession, a glimpse into the heart of the beast that ruled the headlines. The room leaned in, the camera's word. The audience was no longer just watching, they were inside the story, drawn in by the power of her narrative. Person B leaned back, fingers steepled, as if the tale were a story he had seen before. I've been in situations where the truth had no value, where the only thing that mattered was the illusion. He paused, watching the effect of his words ripple through the crowd. In movies, the truth is ignored. The stakes are fictional and the performances are everything. He looked directly at Person A, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. But you have a different kind of pressure. You don't just perform, you shape the world. His voice was calm, but the room felt the undercurrent of something deeper, a challenge that had not yet been articulated. The cameras caught every nuance, every flicker of emotion, every shift in expression. Person A's voice was calm but edged with determination. The truth is not an illusion, Tom. It's survival. Her words rang like a bell, each syllable measured and deliberate, as if she had rehearsed them in the quiet hours of the White House press room. She stepped forward, her presence commanding the space, the kind of aura that could silence a room with the mere flick of an eyelash. But through her, the question lingered. Was this the moment she had been preparing for, or was she still in the realm of uncertainty, waiting for the true fight to begin? Person B, ever the actor, leaned back, his fingers steepled in his lap, an image of effortless control. His gaze was sharp, not just with intent, but with the kind of clarity that comes from knowing the script inside and out. He did not move, did not react, but from the way his muscles tensed just slightly, the audience could sense the battle was about to begin. He had seen many fights in his career, but the way this one was set on a stage under lights with millions watching was uniquely different. This was not the moment for rehearsed lines. This was the cliffhanger, the build-up, the uncharted territory. The air between them was charged, heavy with the unspoken. They were not just two people facing off on a stage. They were embodiments of different worlds, the kind that rarely collided. Hers was a world of policy, of speeches and statements, of lives hanging on the precision of each word. His was a world of narrative, of creating and controlling perception, of making the impossible feel inevitable. And the room, the audience, the cameras, everyone was waiting for the moment when the two would engage, when truth would be bent or broken, when the illusion would either collapse or be reborn in a new form. Person A's voice grew sharper, and for a moment, it was as if she had left the world of politics behind and stepped into the realm of performance. The room seemed to freeze, the cameras unaware of the shift, but the crowd, those unseen millions, were beginning to lean in to listen closely. Her voice, once calm and measured, now carried the weight of every press briefing, every carefully choreographed statement she had ever delivered. They were not just words now. They were the relics of a career, each one a choice carved into the bedrock of her reputation. She looked directly at the audience, her eyes like coals in the night, burning with conviction. In this room, in this moment, I don't just represent the White House. I represent the people who know the truth because they live it. I speak for the families who need answers, for the citizens who depend on the integrity of the information that comes out of this room. That's not an illusion, that's the heart of the job. Her voice was low now, but it carried the power of a gong strike, reverberating with the force of a truth that had been fought for. The room absorbed her words, not just as a reporter might, but as a jury that had walked through the courtroom of her career, the witnesses who had seen her rise and fall in the glare of public scrutiny. There was a weight to her voice, a sense of having been there, having bled for it, and having rebuilt every time. The cameras caught the emotion, the way her hands clenched just slightly, the way her lips pressed together as if she had something more to say that she could not yet admit. And then Person B shifted, his arms uncrossed, his fingers tapping lightly against the chair arm the way a director might adjust the rhythm of a scene. The heart of the job, he repeated, his voice smooth and even. That's a lovely phrase. But what does it mean to you, Karoline? Because in my world, the heart of the job is the illusion, and I've spent a lifetime mastering it. He let the words hang in the air, a metaphor wrapped in a whisper, truth as fiction, truth as portraiture, not as fact. His expression was calm, almost serene, as if he had already seen the outcome of this battle before it ever began. The cameras caught the glint in his eyes, the way his posture exuded the confidence of a man who had lived every moment of the performance he described. But the weight of his words was undeniable. A heart full of truth, but what if that truth was not enough? Person A's jaw tightened, her body language a silent indication that no matter how well Person B had mastered illusion, she had lived in the heart of truth. She had seen the faces of those who believed in her words, who had bet their futures on them. That was not a performance. That was the wage of a trade that did not deal in illusions, but in the raw, inescapable weight of real human lives. She stepped forward, her voice rising like a tide. You can't master truth with illusion, Tom. It's not a performance. It's a passport to a world that doesn't echo in the dark but burns in the light. And with that, the air between them shifted, the room now holding the breath of those who knew the power of both worlds. Person B tilted his head, the motion deliberate, almost amused. A passport, he echoed. That's a new metaphor, interesting, but I've seen people burn in the light before. And more often than not, they're not the ones who end up remembered. His voice was even, but beneath it there was something else, something sharper. He had stepped into the moment now, not as an observer, but as someone who had seen the truth stand against the storm and lose. Or had he? There was a thought, a question, that lingered in his gaze as he met Person A's steady eyes. The cameras captured it all, the war of words and the war of metaphors unfolding in a space where truth and performance were both relevant, both dangerous. And the crowd, that unseen mass of millions, felt the weight of it all. Person A's voice was cool, almost deceptively so, as if she were drawing a sword and waiting for the right moment to strike. Your world of illusion is convenient, Tom. Because in my world, the illusion is a luxury we can't afford. Her tone held the weight of something personal, something deeper than policy or politics. She was not just speaking to him now. She was speaking to the audience, to the world that had forgotten how to tell the difference between a performance and a promise. The cameras adjusted, picking up the faint tremor in her voice, the way her words were precision-guided, each syllable aimed at a specific point in the room. She stepped forward now, her posture no longer just poised but commanding, the presence of someone who had spent her life constructing narratives, crafting them with the kind of care that only comes from experience. Every president has their own script, every White House has its own playwright, but I don't just write lines, I speak for the people who live by them, there's no illusion there. Her voice dropped, the weight of something real pressing against it, like a shadow that had drawn too close. And in a way she was right. The illusion she spoke of was not the same as his. Hers was a world where a misstep could cost lives, where every phrase was a promise that could not be broken without consequence. She had seen the power of words, the way they could mend or shatter depending on the angle of the delivery, the thickness of the silence between them. Person B's eyes gleamed, not with amusement, but with the kind of focus that had brought him to the pinnacle of his career. His voice was steady, a practiced rhythm, but with an undercurrent of something deeper, the kind of knowledge that comes from years of riding the line between truth and performance. Hear that? You just described a hero. And I know a thing or two about heroes, Karoline. His fingers tapped against the arm of the chair, measured. But heroes often die on stage, and they do it exactly like this. There was a pause, the kind that lingers after a reveal, after the moment when the audience feels the shift in direction. The cameras caught the subtle change in her expression, the way the weight of his words seemed to settle like the final act of a screenplay, where the truth and illusion collided at the edge of the frame. Person A's hand tightened on the podium. I don't need heroes, Tom. I need a system that doesn't lie, a country that doesn't forget. Her words were sharp now, precise, each one a blade cutting through the fog of the argument. And if you think I've ever forgotten what's at stake, then you don't know me. She took a step forward, the weight of the moment pressing against the room like a storm. The cameras caught the way the air seemed to ripple around her, the kind of presence that can bend the world to its will. The room was no longer just watching. They were caught in the orbit of her rhetoric, her conviction, her very existence as a symbol of something larger than herself. The room was holding its breath, and the weight in the air felt like a tangible force, something that pressed against the stage like a drumbeat counting down to something inevitable. Person A's voice, once sharp, now wavered just slightly, as if she had stepped over the threshold of certainty and into the realm of the unknown. Because this isn't just about truth, Tom. This is about the people who believe in it. Her words were like a slow burn, something that would not be extinguished despite the forces trying to quench it. The cameras caught her hands, trembling just slightly, the kind of hesitation that spoke of something deeper than nerves. It was the weight of the people she had spoken for, the families who had once lived by the illusion of government and then realized it was not just a movie anymore. It was real. It was raw. It was the blood, sweat, and tears of those who had entrusted her with the impossible job of telling them the truth, even when it hurt. And that was the real fight. It was not about who could speak louder or who could make the better performance. It was about who would walk away with the audience's trust, with the people's belief in something real. She was not asking for applause. She was asking for understanding, for the kind of connection that could not be manufactured with scripts or stage scenes. Person B's smile had vanished, replaced by something darker, something more like the glint of a detective uncovering a secret. You speak of trust, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm for the moment. But trust is fragile, Karoline. It's built on the illusion of reliability, not the reality of truth. And I've seen that truth, the kind that's written by the press, by the public's eyes, bend like reeds in the wind before it's even spoken. His words cut through the silence, a blade against the fragile barrier of her conviction. He was not dismissing the idea of truth, but reminding her that in the real world it was not immune to manipulation, to perception, to the narratives that could be rewritten with the right performance. The air in the room thickened, the tension rising like a tide, drawing every eye in the studio and every unseen viewer into the orbit of the clash between truth and illusion. Personet's lips pressed together, her gaze hardening like the steel of a well-worn dagger. She had spent her career fighting for that trust, enduring every doubt, every spin, every attempt to rewrite it. And now she stood on the precipice of a conversation that could either solidify it or shatter it completely. Illusion is not something I wear, Tom. It's something I fight to escape. That's the difference between you and I. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it. A hint of something personal that had long been buried under the weight of every statement she had ever delivered. The cameras captured the shift in her expression, the way her eyes, once burning with conviction, now held the flicker of something more vulnerable. It was not just a clash of personalities now, it was the collision of two worlds, each with its own version of the truth, and the question of who would be the one to shape it. The studio was silent for a moment, the kind of silence that comes after a thunderclap, after the air has been split by lightning. Personet's words lingered like a shadow, stretching across the stage, across the audience, across the entire nation that was watching from behind the screens. It was not just a battle of ideologies anymore. It was a battle of conviction, of the weight of unspoken words, of the truth that had always felt like a fragile thing. Then Pursenby leaned forward, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of something more. Conviction, that's a dangerous thing to be without, Karoline. His fingers tapped lightly against the chair, the sound like a series of warnings, each strike potentially more ominous than the last. Because what you fight to escape is not just illusion, it's the rules of the game. The game we're playing now, with you speaking truth and me creating the illusion. His voice lowered, and in that moment the audience felt the shift, the way the conversation had turned from a debate into a duet, two voices harmonizing in a battle that had no clear resolution. He was not dismissing her intention, he was challenging the foundation of it. The illusion, he had said, was not just his domain, but the very thing that could guide, shape, influence the truth itself. Personet's eyes narrowed, the fire in her gaze now sharpened to a point. She could feel the press of his words, the way they had settled over her like a second skin. You don't shape the truth, Tom, woman like me do. You just choose when to listen, when to pretend, when to escape. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, the kind that could cut through the noise of reality and leave behind something raw, something real. She stood taller now, as if she had just found the anchor she had been searching for. It's not about the rules of the game, it's about the people who get left behind when the game forgets who it's really for. The room absorbed the words, the weight of the statement pressing against the air like a gathering cloud. The cameras captured every glance, every shift in posture, as if the audience had been given a glimpse into the core of the argument. Pursenby exhaled, the sound barely audible, but it carried the weight of years spent navigating impossible choices, of a life defined by perception as much as by reality. He had spent his career choosing when to tell the truth, when to pretend, and when to walk away. But now he could feel the shift in her, the way she had turned the conversation back to him, back to the world he had spent his life mastering. And in that moment, the long silence was broken by the storm that had been building, the clash of truth and illusion that had already begun to take shape, not just in words, but in the way the room felt the weight of it. The room seemed to shimmer with the energy of the conflict, the way the argument had turned into something more. It was no longer just a clash of ideologies. It was a reckoning, a battle between two opposing forces, each carrying the weight of their own reality. The cameras, ever watchful, captured each flicker of emotion, every shift in posture, every moment where the audience felt they were on the precipice of something unspoken. Personet's voice was steady, but there was a tension in it, like a bowstring pulled too tight. You've spent your life on the stage, Tom, but the stage doesn't give you the right to shape the truth. It just gives you the power to make people believe it. Her words were a blade now, not just cutting through his performance, but cutting through the very idea that he had mastered the rules of the game. She took a step forward, her presence commanding the space like a force of nature. The room seemed to respond to her, the weight of her position pressing against the air like a storm at sea. She had spent years in the press room, in the face of every spin, every media angle, every attempt to rewrite the truth into something palatable. But this was different. This was not a press briefing. This was not a carefully scripted statement. This was a place where the truth had to fight for itself, and she was not willing to let it lose. Pursenby's expression remained unreadable. His hands were still, his fingers no longer tapping against the chair. He studied her, watching the way she carried the fire of a conviction she had spent her life defending. He had faced doubt before, had seen the truth collapse beneath the weight of perception. But he had always found a way to rise again, to reshape the narrative, to turn the illusion into something more powerful than the truth itself. He spoke now, his voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. The truth doesn't always matter in the end, Karoline. People remember stories. They remember the way the world looked when they first saw it, not the facts, the way they felt about it. His words settled like dust on the stage, thick and unshakable. The cameras caught the way the audience leaned in, the way the moment had shifted from a debate into something more, perhaps a revelation, perhaps a confrontation. Personet's voice was low now, but it carried the weight of something that could not be ignored. Feeling doesn't write policy, feeling doesn't bring change. It's only when the truth is spoken, when the facts are faced, that people can choose something different. That's the deal. The room absorbed the words, the way they echoed in the space like the remnants of a past battle. The air seemed to vibrate with the energy of that statement, the way it painted the world in shades of possibility. But it was not just possibility. It was a decision, one that would echo far beyond this stage, far beyond this room, into the lives of the people who depended on the truth. And in that moment, the cameras caught the way the room seemed to pause, the way the audience was holding their breath. Not just for the next punch, but for the moment when the truth would finally take form, when the illusion would finally be tested against the weight of real lives. The studio pulsed with the weight of the moment, as if the very walls had absorbed the energy of the argument. The air was charged, the kind of tension that could crack a lie or expose a truth. And now Personet was ready to strike, her words poised like a sword, waiting for the right moment to cut through the fog of his metaphor. She took a breath, and when she spoke, it was as if the world had frozen. Stories are easy, Tom. They're safe, they don't demand accountability, they don't ask for transparency, they just ask for belief. Her voice was low, steady, but there was something in it that resonated far beyond the stage. It was the voice of someone who had once believed in stories, who had once lived in the glow of the illusion that the world preferred. But she had seen the consequences of that illusion, the way it could distort reality, the way it could make the people believe what was not real, not the truth they were owed. She stepped forward, the movement fluid like a dancer in the spotlight. This is not a story. This is the frontline. We don't make news, we open doors, we don't fabricate truth, we give people something to stand on. Her words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with the weight of every decision she had made, every statement she had delivered. The cameras caught the way she seemed to carry the world on her shoulders, the way her presence had become more than just a press secretary. She was a force of nature, an anchor in the storm. And then Person B answered, his voice smooth but carrying the edge of someone who had walked through similar fires before. An anchor in the storm, he echoed, the words rolling off his tongue with the confidence of a man who had seen storms and known how to survive them. But anchors are only useful if the boat is still heading towards something. If the truth isn't the captain and the illusion is the helm, then the boat sinks. And people don't mourn the boat, they mourn the captain they thought they knew. His words were like a whisper in a hurricane, a challenge wrapped in a metaphor. The room seemed to absorb it, the way every detail was etched into the memory of those watching. The stage was no longer just a place for spectacle, it had become a battlefield, where truth and performance fought for the right to shape the world. Personet narrowed her eyes, the fire in her gaze now tempered with something sharper, something that could not be ignored. Then let's see who the people choose, Tom. Her voice was calm but laced with the kind of conviction that had carried her through every press conference, every crisis, every moment when the line between illusion and reality had blurred. I don't need the illusion to be the story, I need the truth to be the conclusion. Every word she said felt like a ticking clock, a reminder that this was not just an argument, it was a reckoning. The world was watching. The room was holding its breath, and the cameras, never missing a detail, had captured every moment of the battle that had now begun.